Here.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We're so glad you're here. The Oh, I see you guys have already seen the poll, so you know that there's questions being asked. Looks like a lot of people are new here. Feel free to jump into the chat. Let us know where you're attending from. The chat should be on and working. We've got Taylor Stone, Virgil. Virgil, how do you say your last name?
Riglioni.
Riglioni. Sounds like a
Yeah.
fancy pasta dish. I love it. Oh, so good to see everybody. And we've got Luke Dre.
One
Luke is going to
evening,
be
guys.
he'll be leading our webinar today with Taylor and Virgil. We're really excited you guys are all here. Everybody's pouring into the chat. Looks like we've got people from New Jersey. Love seeing Taylor in Vegas. How's the weather been?
It is starting to get warm. I'm dreading it because by the time I get back from this next trip, it's already going to be unbearable.
Yeah. Are you enjoying it more than Florida?
Yes. I mean, no shade to Florida. Florida's great, but Las Vegas is amazing for outdoor adventures. I mean, the climbing, the hiking, it's incredible.
Yeah. Virgil, you are not with us in the United States. Can you tell everybody where you're at?
Yes, I'm in northern Norway, more exactly in Tromsø, and we have been covered in snow these last days. Probably got like a meter and a half, or probably more actually. It's
Love
nice and
that.
cold.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing. Luke, you're in. You actually had a recent transition from
Yeah, I've
one
moved
place
from
to another.
Ethiopia to San Diego. So from one place to a really beautiful place in San Diego. It's blue sky. It's wonderful.
You hopped the pond, huh?
Yeah.
Did you find a house yet?
Not yet. We're working on it.
Yeah.
I
I
see.
Very-
actually I see a lot of names I recognize in this chat. I
Yeah,
see
Sue Darlington is up there. She's going to you with to Svalbard in a few months.
Hi, Sally. So good to see you.
Oh, I see Michael Schimmel in here. He was actually on our Greenland to Svalbard trip last year.
Nice.
Very
Yeah.
fun.
We had an amazing time.
Yeah.
Very fun. Well, it is 4:31. Luke, if you want to get this party started.
Hey, yeah. So I'm Luke, as I said a minute ago. I'm quite excited. I'm one of the new partners of Munch Workshops alongside my wife, Sarah. And this webinar is something I've been quite excited about the last few weeks. It's as much a learning journey for me as it is for you. And today we're going to be learning about the magic of the Arctic with two veteran pros of the polar regions, Virgil and Taylor. They both spent years in the polar regions, and I can't wait to learn from them. I can't wait to learn from them, and together we'll learn some great tips and tricks for photographing the Arctic. Many of you, as Taylor, as Jess said, you've seen the poll already, but we'd love to see if you've been on a Munch workshop before, and if you have, what you love it, what you really enjoy about them, really enjoy about it. Yeah, let's dive right in. Taylor, can you introduce yourself a bit?
Yeah, totally. Hey, guys, I'm Taylor. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada, but I have been working in and traveling in the polar regions for about 12 years. I started out with Iceland and then went straight to Greenland because why not just go directly into the deep end? So today I kind of have specialized in the polar regions, which is amazing. And I'm also finishing my PhD on Greenland indigenous communities. So I'm very invested in the region. Absolutely love it.
And Virgil, a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Virgil Reglioni. I'm originally French. Left home quite a while ago, about I think it's about 13 years ago. So I now work as a professional photographer, specialized in polar landscape and especially also in northern lights. So this is why I'm quite often in winter based in the north of Norway. And I've been working in polar regions since 2016. as an expedition leader and also a guide in Greenland, in Svalbard area, Spitsbergen, in Lapland in Finland, but also in Iceland and in northern Norway. So lots to tell about this polar world, I would say.
Yeah, that's amazing. You've won so many awards. It's been quite an inspiration watching your journey. So Taylor, what inspires you most about the photographing the Arctic?
Yeah, so I think for me, the best thing to encapsulate it is that feeling of transition that I get when I'm there. And there's a quote that I really love by my favorite anthropologist who describes the polar regions as a place of becoming and unbecoming, a world of endless anticipation. And I just love that quote because that really is what the Arctic is. The ice is constantly changing, the light is always changing, the glaciers are moving, the wildlife is fleeting. So everything around you is constantly just arriving and disappearing and evolving right before you. So no trip is ever the same. And that is just really exciting to photograph.
Well, I've never been to the Arctic, so I'm really excited to see what we have in store here. Virgil, Taylor touched on the light, but they say the light is unlike anywhere else on Earth. Can you describe how it changes? You spend a lot of time up there. Can you describe how it changes across the days and the seasons?
Yeah, exactly. Very true what Tal is saying, and the light in polar regions is kind of feel like very precious when you find it, because from a season to another, it really changed quite rapidly. This switch and this transition time that Tal is speaking about in Svalbard and in like Arctic latitudes above like 73 degrees north or something like that, the shift between the summer and the winter up here lasts only about 2 months. So it's quite fast, but it's absolutely amazing. From the winter to the summer, it's like in March, April that this happens, and it makes it incredibly appealing for photography. One of the best timing to go. These changes of light actually affects the whole environment because every living creature which is out there thrives following the amount of light that they receive. So it synchronizes their own life rhythm and their body clock. So the light changes and the sightings also changes. And yeah, the midnight sun in late winter and early springs create like everlasting sunrise and sunset. And it's simply incredible to capture numerous powerful like golden hours and twilights and blue hours type of light. Many times as we come back from a trip and we realize that in one evening you capture the same amount of images with golden hour that you would catch in 1 week. It's actually quite incredible.
And Taylor, I think this is one of your pictures. I mean, I've been to Antarctica, and I imagine it's a little bit similar. The scale of things is just immense. How do you try and capture that scale of things?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because especially when you're surrounded by these huge cliffs, I mean, it's just the nature is massive. And how do you tell a story when everything feels so big? And so it really comes down to finding a scene that you can connect with and creating a sense of scale in your images. Like, even though it appears that this is a small iceberg, this iceberg was very large, but it tells you just how big that cliff is, and this landscape is just absolutely enormous. So it is a creative, a photographic workout, if you will, anytime you're out there.
Where is this picture?
This is on the East Greenland trip, and I absolutely remember this day because it was just so stunning. There was a fresh snow that had just fallen on the upper levels of all the mountains, and the light was just so moody, and the overcast clouds were playing and dancing with the mountains. I mean, it was probably one of my very favorite days of the whole trip.
Yeah,
So
amazing
sorry
place.
guys, if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments, and Jess will keep an eye on them, and we'll do them if it's relevant to a particular slide. We'll do them at the time. If not, we'll do them at the end. So you're talking about overcast days, Taylor. Like when the light is flat or challenging, what creative techniques do you use to make impactful images like this?
Yeah, it's honestly like it can be overcast quite a lot in the Arctic. That is like a very normal condition to experience. And it's actually one of my very favorite to photograph in because it really pushes your creativity. It opens up a lot of opportunities for how to find small details, textures, and to work with the subtleties of light, which is really, really fun. I always would take a cloudy day over a sunny day anytime.
Yeah, wow. I mean, you're talking about the Greenland expedition that you did last year. I mean, how did you find these locations? I can't imagine you've been up to Northeast Greenland many times. It's quite a remote place. How did we use technology, and how did you two both use technology in scouting that trip?
Yeah, I think Virgil and I can probably both speak to this because it was a real collaborative effort between us. We spent so many hours on Google Earth looking at satellite imagery because there's just no resources about how to find these places. A lot of the fjords are uncharted, like no one goes there. People do not visit this area. There's no information online of where to go and where to find shots. So it is a real expedition in the truest sense. And Virgil and I actually had a meeting where we were going to come together and talk about our different pen locations. And we both actually penned this area. So we had a good sense that it would be like a good spot. But Virgil definitely found this particular beach. Maybe Virgil could say more about this beach. It was
Yeah,
crazy.
of course. Of course, yeah, it was a very good teamwork we did together. We studied a lot. Like I remember studying like weeks before the expedition to try to find the best locations. But I think it's something we also both love to do because it's so interesting to do. But yeah, it's by studying maps and counter lines, also trying to collect reports from previous expeditions that I've been in contact with, for example, from other vessels maybe who've been in the area. I knew maybe two or three, something like that. It's not many. But yeah, mostly by studying the charts, the satellite images, localizing geological features, such as we can see on this image, glacial features as well, but also like areas where we know ice concentration can be a bit special. Looking for example, graveyard of icebergs, stuff like that. It's quite interesting to play with. But yeah, and then it's when we are on spot, we do quite, when it's possible, a lot of pre-scouting beforehand to make sure that we can do the operations, that we are matching with safety measures, and maybe we have eventual wildlife sightings. So we can when we are on spot also target exactly what we're looking for. But yeah, the pre-work is quite essential, definitely.
Yeah, I would say it's like equal parts pre-envisioning things and doing the research, and then the other half of it is definitely being able to improvise on the spot and be able to be creative and have that freedom to say, okay, actually, I never saw this on a satellite. Like maybe we should take the Zodiacs and go check that out. And that's really
Yeah, I
fun.
think that's one of the best feeling as well, to be able to get to somewhere without being sure what you find, and then when you find the thing, then it makes it absolutely unique. Something you bring home and you know you're the only one to have. So that's something very special.
Yeah, it seems like few people have set foot up here. It's a really, really, really remote place, and not many ways to get there. So just a little bit quickly about this trip. I mean, Northeast Greenland National Park is the biggest national park in the world, and is bigger than 166 of the world's 195 countries. It's massive. How do we explore this national park on our workshop?
Yeah, it's like we mentioned, we do a lot of pre-planning and then we have a really amazing, very capable expedition ship that is the perfect size to kind of get us into these spots that we don't have a lot of charted maps for. So it is a lot of improvisation. And even though it is a small expedition ship, it is incredibly luxurious to the point that it's like almost absurd. We're eating this incredible French food and there's a sauna on the back of it and it feels like a fever dream. That there's like a
Yeah,
sauna and you can be in the sauna and there's icebergs floating by. And then
yeah.
anytime we see something cool, we go out on the Zodiacs, which to me is like one of the very best parts of the trip is being able to be interactive with the ice and with the landscape. And when possible, we also do some hiking.
So about
Yeah.
the Zodiacs, how do we shoot from them, and what's the logistics of that, and what are the must-have pieces of gear for shooting on a Zodiac? Is it difficult?
You know, there's unique challenges with shooting on a zodiac because you're on a moving platform and it does require cooperation and teamwork. But this is something that Virgil and I are really big on creating that type of teamwork before we ever have to do it. So we talk about all the techniques and we make sure that everyone is really on the same page. That way, when it's go time, there's no confusion about how to work in the zodiac, how to get the right camera settings. Like all of that is already discussed in advance because we don't want you have to figure anything out while you're out there. Like we want you getting perfect shots right out the gate. But there are some challenges and we do talk about that.
You're both Zodiac pilots, I remember, I think.
Virgil has a lot more time in it than me, but yes.
Yeah, definitely. I could also mention definitely one thing is that to complete what you were saying is that we really work like as a team all together. So when we are out there shooting, we have all the tools in our hands to actually be able to create what we want. You know, what we like to create and bring images we want. But the team as well on board, the captain and all that, the teamwork that we do all together is incredible because everyone has a special role to make sure that we can actually bring home the best images, you know. So yeah, it's absolutely incredible to work with this expedition team from the ship and with the captain as well because they are very experienced and we actually know them quite well now. So yeah, it's a pleasure to work with them. But yeah, it's I think there are a couple of things that are quite important as well. When we go out, we have to be ready as well for conditions to change, you know, because we are in areas on the planet which is very remote, where the environmental conditions change quite fast. And if I had to, for example, I don't know, like to advise maybe some pieces of gear, I would always recommend to have a dry bag with you because that's quite important to have that. Just in case things change, in case, you know, not per se that it starts raining or snowing, but if the wind picks up, waves will start to kick and then you can get a bit wet. So it's very important to cover this. And yeah, I think having very good gloves, sometimes we think it's not so important, but it's very important to have good gloves to keep hands warm, but also very practical in terms of shooting. If you come with very puffy mittens, it's maybe not the best idea. So yeah, it's very good to choose the right type of gloves. I think it's quite important in this.
This is something that we definitely talk about before the trip too, with the people who sign up. Like there will be no guesswork. We will tell you exactly what to have with you. We don't want it to be a mystery. I did see one question that in the chat that I wanted to quickly address from Thomas, talking about the number of people. So for our trips, it's a maximum of 12. This is a small group experience, and we have two zodiacs, so there's plenty of room in the zodiacs. I think the capacity for a zodiac is like 10 or 12, and we're only putting 6 people in each. So you have plenty of space to work with.
And Sally just asked, what sort of temperatures are we typically dealing with on this trip?
On this particular trip, it could be anywhere from in Fahrenheit, like 40 degrees to mid 20s. I think it's pretty reasonable temperatures. But of course, we run trips in Svalbard in the early spring as well, and it's much colder then. So yeah, each trip has its unique temperature range that we're working with. It's warmer than Iowa. Yes, it is. The Midwest is brutal.
So, Virgil, as I said earlier, you've won a lot of awards for your incredible ice photography. When you're out in the field, how do you recognize and frame those artistic opportunities like this one here?
That's a very good question. Having the zodiac with us and having this flexibility is absolute key. And this is why, like by now, I really choose to work on this size of expedition vessels because we need this flexibility to capture images like this. With the Zodiac, we have opportunities to position ourselves exactly like we want to be and to really play with this light display that we have. And being flexible is everything when it comes to ice because I always analyze the scene in different ways, either very wide, but also paying attention to these tiny little details that that could create very amazing like abstract shapes, or it could be quite interesting to work with this. with the movement of glaciers and rolling icebergs, the ice changes form and shapes that creates different textures, and it all becomes like piece of art into itself. And it's like, yeah, it creates like a story, and we actually want to take photographs of this story, you know. So when we combine this with great light and our positioning, we often manage to frame very artistic images, wide but also quite intimate and quite abstract. So this would be probably the three main things I would keep in mind: wide, intimate, and abstract.
Talking about really abstract, like we've got the next three slides. This is the wide picture of a very small detail in a piece of ice. Can you kind of explain how you shot this and about the two frames we're going to show the audience in a minute?
Yeah, so this was a piece of ice which was like extremely transparent. Um, what we see in this image, what I love about it, is the actual lack of scale. Usually, I love to add a sense of scale into the image, but when you look at this image, you don't really know if we're talking about like a piece of ice which is like a meter tall or a couple of centimeters, or but the more you dig into it and you start to analyze these textures on the side, and you realize that the ice actually has depth because you can feel the light going through. So I shot that very low to the water from a Zodiac, fast enough because I was on the moving Zodiac, so I needed to have it very nice and sharp. And what I really wanted to try to show is how much the light display changes throughout the thickness of ice. And this is so amazing to work with this. And this is really this intimate, abstract part that I really love to work with.
And just before we move to the next slide, because this is better to see it on this slide, like what's your approach for balancing the intense blues of the ice in post-processing?
So, I mean, there's not one way of doing it. I have different ways because they're also different. It depends on what I want to show into the image. But I use different type of things. So I use, for example, the panels with the HSL, the hues, the saturation, and the luminance of colors. I usually try to color pick one specific place, which is most likely going to be the most contrasted, so I can really pick the exact blue that I want. And then I do a lot of local adjustment to this by using maskings and all that. So maybe some of you guys have been in Antarctica with us, and you know love to work with maskings. But yeah, I use a lot of the time. I use also the color and the luminance range that can really affect specific area into the blues and into part of the frame that creates this depth, this perspective that we witness with our eyes when we're on the field, and that sometimes is very hard to actually translate into an image and to create this visual flow into the scene and to show this depth, you know, because we want to try to show what we're looking at, you know. So yeah, I think this type of techniques mostly that I use for that.
And how, like, when you're looking around an iceberg or a piece of ice, how do you find, like, what do you see in different elements of the ice? Like up here, you've got these like veiny things. Like, how do you use your eye to spot these compositional things?
So usually when we arrive quite far from an iceberg, it's sometimes it's not that easy to see this. You have to get a bit closer. Of course, safety distance first. But this type of shapes and lines appears most of the time on very transparent ice. So you can actually tell already that if you have an iceberg in front of you that's very white, it's going to be a completely different type of texture. Almost like sometimes you can find this like plaster shapes or like these golf ball shapes on the white ice, which is completely different, that is transparent, almost like hexagonal shape that you find sometimes on transparent ice. So ice is amazing. It's like a piece of art, like I was just saying before. And the key is to try to bring these details and this texture into ice, also into snow. You can do it. Transparent or not, there is texture anyway. But the biggest part of the work is actually done in the field. I know that Tyler can also cover this quite well, but controlling the exposure when we're shooting out there in the field is the most important thing, because you want to try to get as much information as possible and to be very careful to how you expose, to not blow your highlights, to not clip your whites, because according to the light you will receive, you have to be very careful of how your highlights are gonna look like. So yeah, in terms of being out there, you really need to master and to control your exposure, and we're here for that, to teach you and to show you when we're on the expeditions. And I would say when it comes to the editing side, when I develop the image on post-processing with the details and the texture, I really use local adjustments and also a lot about the tone curve, which really helps to rise and to work on these shadows and mid-tone contrast. It really helps to balance together the shadows and the highlights, and to actually make your eye to be led into a very specific point into the image. And this is very important, I think, in an image.
That's amazing. Thank you for the insight. Taylor, this time next year you will be in Svalbard. How exciting, eh? What makes winter so special for photography up there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited for this trip because Svalbard is already a phenomenal place. I mean, it's just a really unique, beautiful polar landscape, lots of wildlife. But getting to go during this transition period, Virgil talked earlier about how the transition from winter to summer is rapid. And we timed our trip to be kind of in late March or mid-March, which is just perfect time to have these beautiful long golden hours. We get beautiful blue light when the sun is just below the horizon. And so it's a really, really nice combination of light because you have daytime blue hour and very, very long golden hours. And on top of that, the landscape that time of year is just really, really unique. It's just absolutely minimalist, clean, snow everywhere, beautiful sea ice, like this pancake ice that you can see in this image. And it's just a really interesting time to shoot. It definitely will challenge you in terms of photography, and I always love a good photographic challenge.
Um, and then what is the temperature like, and what is this smoke that we're seeing here?
Yeah, so there's a lot of cool things that happen this time of year because the ocean water that's starting to open up is actually warmer than the air temperature around it, and it creates what you see in this image, which is ice smoke that's coming off of the ocean. It's just because of the temperature differential that's created, and so it creates these amazing atmospheric conditions, which is so cool to shoot in, especially when you get that golden hour light and fingers crossed, some wildlife coupled with this. I mean, that is exactly what we're looking for. The
So this
temperature, you asked about temperature. So it's gonna be pretty cold, guys. So, it's gonna be usually negative temperatures. So Fahrenheit, probably like negative 10 or 15. But we prepare you in advance for exactly the right type of gear. I have personally been in these temperatures many times, and you're gonna come back with all your fingers and toes, so don't let that bother you.
Hey,
I
Taylor, you had mentioned the wildlife. Vaughn Hart has a question. He said that he had read that there's new rules about how close you can get to the wildlife. Can you just speak a little bit
Yeah.
about how that will impact the trip if we can't get as close as we used to?
Totally, and that's a really good point to bring up. So Norway recently has passed some new legislation about how close you can get, particularly to polar bears. So those rules are in effect within 12 nautical miles of shore, which is important. And it's another reason that going this time of year is amazing because if there's good sea ice and pack ice, we'll be doing a lot of our shooting outside of that 12 nautical miles, which means that we may be able to have closer encounters than we would otherwise. Fingers crossed. Also, during this time of year, if we are anchored to the ice and a bear approaches, we are not actually required to relocate the ship. So if the animal approaches on its own terms, then we are going to be able to work with that animal. So there's a couple caveats that to this rule that make it still like a great time to go, a great time to hopefully encounter wildlife and just an incredibly beautiful landscape. Virgil or Luke, if you wanted to add to that, please.
No,
Uh,
but
you-
there's also some other rules, I believe, that where if a walrus is on the ice, for example, I don't believe you don't have to that you haven't got the same problems as if it's on a landing. Is that correct, Virgil?
sorry, can you repeat this? It cut off.
If a walrus is on the ice, you don't have the same restrictions as if it's on a landing on land. On a
Yeah, in that, what you're talking about walruses, no? For
yeah,
example.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. On the ice, yeah, indeed. So when in any ways when we try to approach, we have to do this extremely gently to not disturb them, of course. But yes, indeed, inland we can still approach them, but we have to be a little bit more cautious. There are some rules where you need to keep some distance, of course, and it also depends if it's a male or, for example, female with cubs or things like this. But on ice, we are able, from the zodiacs, to actually approach very gently and to cruise around and get quite close to them. So it's very beautiful opportunities for photography, definitely.
Yeah, so talking about opportunities for photography, this is the captain of the Virgo, which is the ship we use, sent these pictures this morning from yesterday via satellite, and this is the light that they're experiencing right now. It's really, really beautiful.
I know that spring light. Oh,
Yeah.
amazing.
And all of that pancake ice, you can really see why it's called pancake ice here. And you can see a little walrus in the top right-hand side up there.
You say little walrus, that thing is big.
That is huge.
And then things like the black guillemot, they're still up there. Really, really beautiful
Yeah.
pictures. So yeah, we go up there at this time of year. And I mean, what else makes what makes what else makes Faba so special at this time of year? We're seeing wildlife in the snow a lot more, or we're seeing landscapes in the snow a little bit more. Can you touch upon that?
For
I can
me, it's the minimalist, like the minimalism of it all. Having that clean landscape and being able to photograph the animals in that way is for me exactly what I look for with wildlife photography. But Virgil could probably say more about it.
Yeah, it's like for this time where we're actually leading the workshop is absolutely perfect during this like March transition, because like during winter a major part of Svalbard is trapped into the ice. So of course it's completely inaccessible. The only thing you would need to do is basically wait for the ice to start to open, and this is exactly what we're doing. And March and April shows the first retreats, and the ice leaves behind open water, just ready for us to explore. And yeah, during this month, the light is in transition, as we said, and offering this golden twilight. And yeah, the landscape, as you said, I could just repeat what you just said. It's just pristine white, and it really reflects the polar vibe that we are looking for. If you are in search of like portfolio images that really reflect this cold and polar atmosphere that you look for, this is the one. You know, like the light dictates the I would say the breeding rhythm of animals up here. So you know, at this time of the year, the ring seals use the ice to breed and to rest, and the bears use it to hunt as well. And weeks after weeks, the ice slowly disappears, and it gives space to the summer creatures, like the birds are coming, the whales are coming as well. So as the months go by, the photography evolves as well. And yeah, as far as, for example, as the eastern side of Svalbard, later during the year, this transition happens where it slowly opens up, and the ice retrieves further out, and it really gives us the opportunity to explore even further out. So yeah, in terms of photography, it also gradually changes throughout the season. You know, this is how we adapt our photography to it.
And Taylor, you mentioned the cold temperatures. How do you keep the gear performing? How do you keep the batteries warm? And how do you
Yeah.
keep your feet warm in these temperatures?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I would say is like, I think most people's concern with a trip like this is going to be the temperatures, and I would say don't let that dissuade you. Me and Virgil both have worked a lot in these types of temperatures, and it's really like a really amazing experience. And honestly, having the right gear is key, and we will get you set up with making sure you have all the right warm gear so that you stay nice and warm. In terms of keeping the cameras functioning, I have almost never had an issue with that, and I did get to live in North Greenland over winter, and my R5, shout out to Canon, performed beautifully the entire time. You know, you just have some extra considerations in terms of keeping your batteries warm. And then also you have to be a little cautious about transitioning your cameras from shooting outside to being in your warm cabins that are there waiting to warm you up. And you have to be a bit cautious about doing that. And that's something that we talk about during these trips so that you don't end up having condensation form in your gear.
And then
If I can add something.
yeah.
Oh, yes. I'm just gonna add something. Yeah, yeah. What Tyler is saying is pretty much also what I had in mind. And the very good thing I can tell everyone is that I think Tyler and I have done the mistake that no one should do, so we know what not to do regarding the taking care of the gears. So we've been there, we've done it, and we are here to advise everyone on how to be careful and not to shock your lens or anything like that. So yeah, to give you an example, I always take my backpack outside, like even if I'm literally on the deck. So yeah, so I have easy access to my gears, to my extra layers, to store my batteries as well. And then yeah, when I'm done shooting, I put it back into my cold backpack and go back inside. And so everything stays cold and gradually like comes back to I would say neutral temperature. These tiny little tips is essential when you're there, and we're here for this. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about this.
Definitely. What Virgil said about you put your gear back in the backpack and zip it up before you go inside, and it acts like a temperature regulator that very well slowly warms your gear up if you just leave it inside the bag. That way the condensation doesn't happen. That look, learn that lesson the hard way.
Um, and I've heard this story before, which is why I wanted to put it in. I like, can you describe these can you describe what this animal is? It's not a cow.
Yeah,
And then
this
about
is
the experience of coming across it. And I know Virgil, you found them, but I'd like to hear it from both of you.
Yeah, this was probably one of the best wildlife experiences of my life. I'm not even exaggerating at all because muskox can be incredibly difficult to get close to. They're very, very shy animals. But we found this landing that Virgil actually found this crazy pink lake, and we decided to hike out to this lake and check it out. And we were hiking up over this hill, and Virgil just froze and was like, waving his hand. And we couldn't see like what he was talking about yet, and he was like, very quietly come up, and there were this family of musk ox with a couple females and a calf, and they were so close to us. I mean, it was incredible, this experience, and they were very tolerant of us. They just observed us and let us photograph them. It was surreal. I couldn't believe it. Virgil, maybe.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. Yeah, like I was ahead, like simply doing polar bear safety, making sure. And when you expect to see something white, and all of a sudden you turn around and you see something brown, it's it's still a bit shocking. You don't know what you're looking at, but it was very close as well. And I felt this rush of adrenaline of like, oh my God, it's like right next to us. And I think the whole group as well, we were absolutely amazing. All of us photographers, we just all approached super slowly and just like let it be, and let them undisturbed. They were just staring at us and minding their own business, and then just left. And it was absolutely such an amazing experience. And to get close, super close to them, it's like so not so. It's quite hard sometimes. So yeah, it's by doing this type of hikes when we study the terrain and stuff like this. It's by doing such operations that we actually get to see such things. So yeah, super happy about this landing, definitely.
Yeah.
So I mean, I looked at your website, Virgil, when a while ago, and you've seen so many polar bears. Can you describe the majesty of a polar bear?
Ooh, that's yeah, I could speak for hours about that. It is quite unique. The majesty is a very nice word to describe it. When these creatures are walking onto land or ice or anything, you feel the power when you stare at them. I think the most power I've ever felt from a bear is when they literally look at you into the eyes, and they stare at you. It's like, wow, it's so powerful. And yeah, it's just like I've been guiding and not only like working as a photographer, and so I've learned so much about them. And I think this had put me in such a position that I actually understand so much different things about how they behave, about what they do when they hunt, what they do when they feed, the way they feed, the rhythm of feeding, and all that. That it really makes you understand so many things that you don't see them the same way. You quickly, after a while, recognize if it's male, female, young, old, and then it really automatically sets a context to what you're looking at. And this is, yeah, it's absolutely amazing. They are like the apex, up there, and to have them facing you it's no words. It's very hard to describe, to be honest, but it's something to bring home once in a lifetime, definitely.
And you're infamous for not having a long telephoto lens, Virgil. Um,
Yeah.
like we were talking about the rule of staying so far away from polar bears within the 12 nautical mile limit. How can you use the background to really frame the context of the polar bear and its environment, like this picture here?
Yeah, so as we were saying before, like we try to edit out beyond this 12 nautical miles limit, which most likely we do as well, because nowadays the ice retrieves far enough away from this limit that to go and actually find the pack ice, you actually have to travel quite a bit. The very important thing is as well to go and find this pack ice and spend some time there and just cruise along and try to find. But when you find a bear, as you say, I don't use telephoto because I've never like I love watching images, a very close up of the fur and all this. I find it absolutely amazing, but I love taking the context of where the bear is evolving and thriving. You know, like this very landscape motion in there. You know, and this bear really adds this sense of scale and this story behind where it is and behind the environment so fragile that they are thriving in. So I guess it really depends, but like for March, April, having them on this very pristine landscape, this is absolutely stunning because it really reflects this polar vibe. So using glaciers or mountain shapes or yeah, any sense of depth and magnitude into an image, this is really what I'm aiming at. So yeah, I don't use telephoto, and many times what I do when I look at the landscape and I see a bear there, I still do not straight away pay attention directly to the bear, but more to my backdrop, and then I'm slowly like kind of move around so I can place my little bear in there. So I have a very different approach, but it's yeah, I find it very interesting as well to work with this.
And Taylor, what other wildlife can we see in the Arctic?
Yeah, so the different trips have different wildlife. So the Greenland Svalbard trip, we talked about muskox. There's the possibility of polar bears, Arctic fox. There's also the Arctic hares, which we saw plenty of, and a different variety of birds as well. And so for the Svalbard trip during the winter time, you'll see hopefully polar bears, Arctic fox. Fingers crossed the whales will be starting to return, possibly that early, as well as some birds. The walrus, bearded seal. Let's see, what am I missing? The reindeer, the Svalbard reindeer as well. I
Amazing.
love walruses, by the way. And so I have to confess that the first time I went to Svalbard, I was just like not sure about photographing them. I was like, man, I don't know. The walruses might be kind of boring because like they kind of just like lay there. I don't know if they're that interesting. And the second I saw my first walrus, I was obsessed with them. They are so charismatic and so fun to photograph. They're just amazing animals.
Amazing. I think that's it. But there's been quite a few questions in the chat, Jess. What have been the really important ones?
I guess one of the most important questions people are asking about right now is the gear and equipment that you recommend using. And I guess we touched on that just a little bit with Virgil about the lenses that he likes and uses. But if you'd like to talk about exactly what those lenses are, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that for me, I'm gonna use everything from 15 millimeters to 500, and I'm gonna use every single bit of that when I'm in these landscapes, because for me, Arctic landscapes are so grand and so vast that it really is a compositional workout. There are so many different things to shoot, and I love shooting textures and details, so I really need to have that telephoto lens. But I also like to shoot wide angle, and I know that Virgil is big on the wider shots, and he shoots tons of environmental stuff. So it kind of depends on your shooting style as well.
Yeah, I think it's a very like very good answer because I think to be able to figure out what lens you would need, what focal you want to use, you really need to understand and to figure out what exactly you want to shoot. It's very hard to answer this question because some of us will really love doing like animal portraits, and some of us, like me, doing more environmental images. So you will not use the same piece of gear, even though we're looking at the same thing. So it really depends of what you're after. But yeah, I would take very like the same, like from 15, very wide, absolutely amazing to create leading lines with the ice formations from the zodiacs, to like telephoto for portraits of animals. It's yeah, it's wide to it's quite a wide range to say this, but it is very very true basically.
Taylor, how do you teach composition with all of these varying lenses? How do you teach composition to clients?
I mean, a lot of it is individual specific. So like everyone brings their own creative vision with them when they come on these trips, right? And like you have your own style, or we're there to help you find it. Our job is always going to be pointing out things that we find interesting and then trying to help you if you also find that interesting. So there's no one shot. And I think that that's really important to understand, especially on like an expedition trip. There's no like one shot to get. There's just so many options available to you, and we work with you hands-on in the field, and we position the zodiacs so that we can fulfill like whatever that vision is that you have. um, I did see some questions about changing lenses on zodiac, so since we're talking about lenses, I'll just go ahead and say, generally we recommend that you bring two camera bodies, one with a longer lens and one with a wider, to minimize lens changing. However, there are times that you might have to change lenses on the Zodiac, and it's entirely possible to do that as long as we're in calm seas. And if you're not comfortable doing it yourself, then just ask a friend, ask one of us.
Thank you. Virgil, do you have any recommendations? Do you use two bodies?
Um, so I often try to figure out first of all before going out to try to to figure out which I would like to use. I'm also using like a Prime 15, so this one is I usually keep it on the side, and I use a 28-200, and this is the biggest I have. So that covers quite a wide range as well. So my 28-200 is pretty much the one I'm using almost all the time for my environmental images when I go out on zodiacs.
Thank
But yeah,
you.
to
Taylor.
get back to the changing lens on zodiac is definitely possible. I would maybe recommend, if you want to do that, definitely on calm weather, and try to practice at home. To do this in a way that you expose your sensor as least as possible to the air. So try to you practice a little bit at home to change from a lens A to lens B in the most effective and fast way and safe way.
We know that Taylor shoots Canon. What do you shoot with?
I should Sony.
Thank you. We
Yeah.
have another question about seasickness, and that is an issue on an Antarctic trip that they've experienced. Do we have rough seas in Greenland as well?
I would say that when we're in the fjords, it's all very, very protected, so we are not encountering anything like that. When we do the sea crossing over to Svalbard, it is possible to have some waves. The last trip that we had, there were some larger than usual waves, and there were a handful of people that struggled with that. But these are things we discuss in advance. There's medication for that, but I would say that's not a standard experience. And generally, when you're closer to the ice or closer into the fjords or by land, you're quite protected.
Yeah, we also do a very big teamwork with the captain and with the crew to, of course, time it as well as possible. So we try to get the calmest water as possible. So when we do this crossing, we really analyze the weather forecast and all the low pressures that are coming, the wave height, so we can ensure to have the most comfortable crossing as possible.
Thank you. I do have a poll that I just launched. It's, are you interested in joining us in Svalbard? If you see that on your screen and you have an opportunity to answer that question, that would be really helpful for us to know. Just to kind of gauge where you guys are at, if you're interested in joining us or not. If you have any other questions, definitely drop them in the chat. Now's the time. We'd love to address the questions that you have. I did see one question come in. about the ship and seeing approximately 30 people on the ship and questions like that. So we just want to reassure you that this is a trip that is open to 12 people. That does not include Virgil and Taylor. All 12 people who will be participating in the workshop are typically going to be interested in photography. If they're not interested in photography, it's because they're a friend of the photographer or a spouse, partner, something like that. So this is definitely a photography-based workshop, and that is the point of the trip entirely. We do have some questions about the difference between March versus September. Virgil, is that something you could speak to, weather-wise?
Sorry?
The difference between the trip in March versus September.
Yeah. So the light in the September and further out after September is kind of becomes a little bit similar, I would say. But in terms of landscape, what you see will be quite different because the snow will be gone in September. Now, the great thing though is that in September being later, the ice is quite far out, which allows us to go further east into even like further out into the wilderness of Northeast Landet and the eastern side of Svalbard. So it also offers great opportunities for this to explore further out where you have different type of landscape. Yeah, I saw also earlier a question quickly about bears in summer. Of course, we have polar bears all year long in Svalbard. To make it quite fast, because I told you guys I can speak hours about this. We have like two different subpopulation of bears. We have more local bears that are staying all year round in some fjords areas, and more pelagic bears. And these ones are basically following the ice edge. So it's not because we're going to the ice edge or we stay into Spitsbergen area into more protected fjord that you have least chance to see bears, because you have different populations. So we see both in the same time, in the same amounts. And in terms of temperature in the summer, it could be, I would say, between 5 Celsius to maybe up to 15 on a warm day, which is not good for up there. But I would say between 5 and 10 Celsius, something like this. So it's actually quite nice for photographing.
Thank you, Virgil. We've had a few questions about the recording for the webinar itself. That's something that we will send out within 24 hours of the of the webinar ending. So you will receive this via email just as soon as it's done.
I did see a question about instruction on board the ship. So not only are we very hands-on in the Zodiac and onshore, but we also provide instruction while we're on the decks of the ship, and we offer many opportunities for editing classes, skills intensive classes like working with polarizers, and we also have opportunities for you to share your images within the group and receive feedback on that. So these are all like really important parts of the learning process, and I think that it dramatically contributes to improving images from the beginning of the trip to the end of it.
I'm just seeing a question from Daisy. On the Greenland to Svalbard trip, how many days is it a Greenland to Svalbard trip, or how many days are we in Greenland for? I can't quite remember.
It depends. We spend the majority of the time actually in Greenland because the Greenland National Park, as Luke mentioned, is just positively massive. And so there's a lot to see there. And then we look at the weather and we try and time our crossing. So there was quite some bad weather this past year. So we only got to spend like a day and a half actually in Svalbard, which is not the intended plan, but that was to avoid the worst of the weather. In a more perfect scenario, we would be able to spend a couple more days over there, but it all is completely dependent on the waves, the weather, what's happening for that crossing, because it's a real expedition. And sometimes the perfect plans end up having to be improvised.
Yeah, it also really depends on the ice coverage because the pack ice shifts quite a lot and the quality of ice does change a lot. So we are also, when we reach the very far north of the Northeast National Park of Greenland, we encounter usually at this time of the year, we encounter some of this pack ice and we're looking for good quality of ice where the bears are roaming on or wildlife in general. So it's very also like something we keep in mind, trying to find this good quality of ice. And when you go out towards Svalbard at this time of the year, the ice is very, very far north. So we are very much trying to enjoy as well this time in Greenland where we can find this ice.
I did see some questions about how physical these trips are, and that actually is a really good question that we haven't talked about yet. I would say that if you are able to get off of a ship into a Zodiac, which is just a small step, then you are probably perfect for this trip. Because it's just a matter of getting on and off the Zodiacs, and we do offer some hiking opportunities on shore. So for the hikes, I think that they are fairly moderate. I think the longest we walked was maybe 3 miles, and we spent several hours doing that. So it is not a forced march or anything like that. So the intention is to get out and to be able to walk and enjoy the nature. And so we try and create opportunities like that. We do go out on Zodiac operations or on shore. We try to do at least twice per day. Sometimes we're able to do more, and sometimes we end up doing like one outing and then we are able to shoot from the deck of the boat. So a lot of this just varies from day to day.
Thank you for that. I think we've covered all of the questions. Is there
I did see
anything?
one specific question that came up more than once about gloves. And this is always like a really big question for cold weather. I personally recommend a 2-layer system. So like one base layer pair of gloves and then a pair of mittens that you're able to easily like either unzip or fold back so that you can still operate the camera. Maybe Virgil wants to add to that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can mention any brand or anything like this, but I'm using like a mitten that zips from the side to the top with an inner like down layer glove as well. Very practical when shooting. I do not use the one that you can open the last bit of the index and the thumb. Because yeah, I find it a little bit cutting the tip of the finger, and it really gets cold. So it's not my favorite. I prefer this mitten with a down layer underneath. That's much better.
You can mention brands, Virgil. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. I'm using. I work in collaboration with Valeret, which is a Norwegian brand, and they do excellent gloves. And they have a model called the Skadi, which is very good. So I would recommend these gloves for sure.
If you'd like, Virgil, you can send me a link for that and I can send that out in the email after with the recording as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
And is there Wi-Fi on the ship? I saw one question about that. I think there's Starlink.
There is Wi-Fi.
There is Starlink. Yeah.
Virgil, what about the Aurora? Since we talked a little bit about your photography.
Yeah. I saw this question. I was like, "Ooh, that one is for me." So Northern Lights is possible, of course, weather permitting. We need to have clear sky to get to see Northern Lights. Now, so there is one thing is that at this time of the year, when we start slowly moving north, we are very slowly escaping the oval of Northern Lights. So every single night you have an oval of light that is basically located above our heads when we arrive in Greenland. And the further north we go, the more we go away from it. So if we do have options to see Northern Lights, it will be probably in our, I would say, first 3 or 4 days. And then we will be too far north to see them. It's almost weird to say that, but we will be too far north to see them.
Thank you. Taylor, can you speak to the terrain that we'll be on for the 3-mile hike?
Yeah, so I mean it is I think fairly easily walkable. Just if you take your time, there are some hills that it can be a little bit rocky, but generally speaking, if you are able to walk 3 miles, then you would be able to walk that hike. And again, we're not doing it all at one time. We are breaking it up, we're shooting as we go, and we're taking our time. No one gets left behind.
I love that. I love that. Anything else you guys wanted to share? Maybe just something off the top of your mind or something that came up after the
Yeah,
presentation?
I would add that if you're considering any of these trips, for me, if you want like the real like polar, the grit of a polar experience, that spring Svalbard trip is really like you feel the embrace of the cold up there and you get that truly amazing like winter landscape. And then if you want something that's like very, very expedition feeling, and feeling the like the citizen science of actually going out and scouting these fjords and finding these, and it's a collaborative experience where we're all trying to decide where we want to go that day. Then the Greenland Svalbard really offers that. Like, if you want a true expedition, that is the ultimate, like, real expedition, going in places that people have never been, landing on islands that someone has probably never walked on before. And that is just really pretty amazing.
Thank you, Taylor. Can you also speak to how we handle emergencies, like medical emergencies?
Yeah, so I mean, the ships have these programs totally dialed in, right? So they have protocols that they follow in case there was something that happened for medical evacuation. So we would just follow the international safety standards, and the ships already have that in place.
Perfect. Thank you. I hope that answers everybody's questions. We appreciate everybody being here today. Virgil, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, yeah, that was my thoughts were on what Taylor just said regarding the trips. Yeah, yeah, not much to add. She described it very, very well, and I hope to see as many of you as possible in the upcoming months and years.
Yeah, for sure. Michael, thank you for sharing your experience on the trip last year. We really appreciate your feedback. Of course, that's very valuable for people that are considering traveling with us in the future. Everybody, we will be sending out the recording as well as links to some of the clothing items that were mentioned. And if you need anything else or have any questions, you can definitely reply to that email. We'll all be very happy to help you. We hope you guys have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you,
Yeah, thanks,
guys.
guys.
You
And if you
guys,
have any questions, please feel free to just reach out to us. Just ask us. I know Virgil and I and our whole team, we're all very accessible and happy to talk to you. So just write us.
100%.
Thanks again, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.